start by asking you, Annemieken, what does creativity mean to you in your work and in your life?
I think in my work it means that I'm finding ways, answers, strategies that are not visible at first hand, let's say, that kind of come to me. It's like, I always say, it feels to me like in those creative moments, it feels like I'm almost like a channel where something comes through and I can just put it out there. And afterwards, I often ask myself, where did it come from? How did that come up? But it does. Yeah. And I think those are
like an intuition. Is that, is it like an intuition that comes through you, or is it something different to that?
I think it's like it has a lot to do with intuition. It seems like the moments that I'm really present, that I'm really in the here and now, whether it's on my own or with other people, those are the moments that this kind of creativity comes up, and it's to me pretty impressive, and it's always very useful if it's with other people, if there's something coming up for them. In my work, I mean, in my coaching work, for example.
Okay. Yeah, in your coaching work. So it's almost like being an instrument for something, isn't it? It's like
Yes.
that you're being played, and then so the other facet about creativity is that it doesn't occur in a vacuum. It does occur in the context, and when in the context you've got other people, sometimes it's that co-creation. So it's the co-creation of something which couldn't possibly exist if the two of you, or more than that, were present. So have you noticed, well, even when we are creative on our own, there isn't anybody physically present. There are others who are present even though they might not be there physically, in terms of their ideas, their concepts that we might have picked up during our education or during our own research. Do you have any examples where you have been creative and you've been aware that creativity, it came through you, but also it came through you in collaboration with many others who were not physically present?
Yes, certainly. I call it's like inspiration that you kind of build on, or that leads to something else. And it can come from different ways. Like somebody says something. It could be a mentor, or somebody you just open a book, you see something there, and it kind of leads to other perspectives, insights, new ideas that come up. Certainly, I think it's a lot in co-creation, whether people are physically present or not. And for me, often, like in my work, if we are on that same in that same context, ideas come up to invent new workshops or new themes, or if I work within a workshop with people, new ways of handling things come up that I can give to them, that they can use, and often those inspirations are set off by other people that are not physically present, actually. Yeah, okay. Certainly.
So it's a combination of those who are physically present and those who may not even be physically present, but their ideas have had an influence on you. That leads to me to an important question about creativity in terms of ownership of ideas. In the coaching world, there's a lot of emphasis on trademarking, copywriting. So who owns those ideas? When we accept that those ideas just came through us, they didn't always come from us, but through us, who owns those ideas?
That's a really good question. It's not a simple one to answer for me, because as you say, they often, there's a part that we added to it, that you might say reinvented ourselves, but there's another part that might come from someone else or totally from someone else, and you use it in a different way. So who owns the idea? I think that's a very difficult thing to really pinpoint. I can understand on the other side that it's an important issue, because there's the part that there's the marketing part, there's the making money out of the whole thing, and that's why I think the whole owning of an idea is important for some people, but I think it's very difficult to do that, actually. Yeah.
There are cultures in the world where people just don't put their name to their creations because they accept that it was a collaboration, it was a collective effort, and so to put our name to that, something that we've created, would be like a total no-no. That would just be very egotistical to even try to do that. It would be discouraged. So whereas in the Western culture there is much more of an emphasis on individuality and the individual's right to copyright and to trademark, and it seems to be becoming more and more entrenched in our culture that whatever idea we have, we trademark it. So you even get people trademarking two words in the language, words that we use commonly, but they trademark it. So do you think that enhances creativity, or do you think that might discourage people from sharing ideas because they don't want the ideas to be stolen?
I think it's a discouragement. I don't think it enhances creativity. I think it might limit people, like you say, out of fear that it might be stolen. And on the other hand, the idea will not get spread by others either, because they might be afraid that the inventor, the so-called inventor, is afraid that you are stealing their ideas. So, and in the end, it's very hard to know what can I use in certain contexts, and what can't I, if there's this trademarking. And especially in a coaching setting, my primary focus when I'm working is trying to help people move forward in their life, grow, and if you can't use or build on ideas that you picked up along the way, I mean, because there's a lot of growing that you do yourself in your work, then it becomes very difficult, because it's very limiting.
So how do you overcome that?
Well, for myself, I don't trademark anything. That's the first. I think the first idea that you mentioned, that not trademarking ideas and just use them when they are useful. I think that's the main thing, and that's what I do for myself. If I know that something is trademarked and I do want to use it, I will, if it's in a interaction, an actual verbal interaction, I will say that this comes from this person, and that they can find material and the information, and they can even go and do workshops there with this kind of material. But I do use it in a small way in the context that I am at that moment.
Yeah, so I suppose academically, that is the appropriate way to do it. It's just to acknowledge where the idea came from, but that shouldn't, we need to be building on those ideas, adding our own perspective to them. So you are creating by adapting the idea. So that kind of takes me to this question of, like, what do you think in terms of, in the coaching world, what are some of the ideas that you find to be the most creative? In the work that you do, can you think of an example of an idea that you find to be very creative, and therefore you enjoy using it because it's very creative, produces results?
Yeah. Well, for example, I'm using a few ideas and techniques and ways of working from Linda Kohanov. This is a very big source of inspiration for me. And one of the things I can talk about is the work around boundaries, for example. That is one that I use a lot in the work with horses. And each time it's different because you work with different people, different horses, so it's adapted each time you actually use it, and it's my style of working with it. I've seen Linda work with it, and she works with it in a different way, but it's the same idea. So I think that's a pretty good example of using ideas from other people in your own context. Yeah.
And would that idea be would it be useful regardless of culture, or do you think that the idea has an impact within certain cultural boundaries?
I'm not sure whether I understand the question right. Could you reframe it, Jesvir?
Yeah. Because sometimes something is seen to be very creative in one context, but you take it to another context and it's not very creative because the timing has to be right, the location has to be right, the personalities. So sometimes an idea is very kind of stimulating in one context but not so stimulating in a different context. So do you think that the ideas that you use, are they creative in a particular context, or do you think that they can transcend the cultural context?
I think it really depends on the idea. Some ideas are really can be used in any context, or could be useful in any context, or could be a contribution in any context, and others probably not. I mean, to me, it really depends on what we're talking about. But thinking your question over, I probably think most of them are context bound, I would say. Yes.
Yeah, because boundaries, when we talk about emotional boundaries, or people have different perspectives on what is appropriate.
Yeah. And that's indeed very, it's very cultural bound. It's dependent on the culture you live in or you came from. Yeah. Yeah.
Even things like how close people can sit next to each other, or when they're speaking to each other.
Are very different. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So.
But on the other hand, the concept of boundaries and the way that I work with it is also transcendent in that sense that it will be different for different people from different cultures, but the essence of it, the essential principle around it is the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It could be translated differently for each person. Yeah.
So, in terms of creativity, what are your main kind of concerns? What are the pressures or the restrictions or the limitations or the barriers that you find that you face in your work that restrict you from being as creative as you possibly could be?
Well, you named the first one when we started talking, busyness. It's not too busy. That limits creativity because you kind of rush from one thing to the other, and creativity, for me, in order to be creative, I really need to be present. I mean, I need to be in one place at one moment and find a kind of. It certainly requires me to become still in a way. And if I'm too busy, I can't do that. I'm just running from one place to another, which prevents me from being creative. And also, I think fear is a big one. And that can be fear in many different, for many different things. It could be fear of failure. It could be fear of not having enough security in many different ways. Any kind of fear will limit your creativity, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'd agree with you that creativity when there's that pressure. Pressure is a kind of fear, meeting the deadlines and whatever. That just yes, it kind of, it's oppressive. It's usually not very creative, but there's that pressure of trying to achieve goals as well. That in the Western society, there's professionals. Sometimes the more renowned you are, the better you are at your job, the more the pressure there is on you to be very busy. And so how do you maintain that balance of like being successful and all the pressures that go with being successful, and at the same time having enough slack time where you don't seem to be very productive? How do you balance that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important to allow yourself that time off, and that not busy time. I think that's the main thing. I really almost plan it in, like not really schedule in a very practical way, not really schedule a full agenda, and on the other side really take time to have time off and take time to just sit down and allow yourself to let creativity come up, and I think goals are not don't prevent that. Maybe even sometimes on the contrary, it's good to have goals, but without the pressure. I mean, it's good to know where you want to go to, and from that perspective, look at open things up and look at what are the possibilities, which are the ways to go, and let creativity come in there. But not like I need to reach this goal, and that's the pressure, and then the creativity stops.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. So we've spoken about a lot of important issues around creativity. The issue about who do the ideas belong to. That's an important factor, and the culture. That what's creative in one culture might not be creative in the other, and that's especially relevant to boundaries and the importance of having enough slack time so that we're not under pressure to go from one thing to the other on a treadmill the whole time, because creativity isn't that's not how it arises.
No.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Annemieken. That's been brilliant.